This rare audio recording is brought to you by UFOTV.com and the Spirit Culture Preservation Project. UFO TV and Spirit Culture, preserving the sacred in art and culture through technology.
This is the 16th anniversary of a classic for ufologists. It's the story of the Braxton County Monster. When this story broke, it stretched the imagination of many people the world over. And the story has been told and retold in the past 16 years in just about every country in the world. And when this happened, Ivan Sanderson, the world-renowned naturalist, world traveler, author, was asked by True Magazine and the North American Newspaper Alliance to come to West Virginia to get the facts about the Braxton County Monster for True Magazine and for a series in North American newspaper alliances. So in 1953, I got in touch with Long John Neville, a close friend of ours for many, many years in New York City, and told him at that time to get a tape for me interviewing Ivan Sanderson about his investigation of the Braxton County Monster. And this also was investigated by Gray Barker, who is from Clarksburg, West Virginia, the author of They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers and many other stories about flying saucers. So we start the program going back to the year that this happened, 16 years ago, the appearance of the Braxton County Monster, as told by Ivan Sanderson.
This morning we're talking with Ivan Sanderson, the gentleman that investigated the West Virginia Monster. And we have Walter Rochette with us, and we also have Donald Cohn with us. Now, Hugh McPherson, who is the all-night man at the station in, I think it's Charlestown, West Virginia.
Charlestown. Mm-hmm.
He's been very interested in getting the facts about the famous West Virginia Monster. I think Gray Barker was the author of a book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And if I'm not mistaken, Ivan, you investigated the West Virginia Monster.
Gray and I were there at the same time, as a matter of fact, along with a lot of other newspaper reporters.
Well, now we're taping this portion of this morning's show, and we're going to send this tape down to Hugh McPherson. Incidentally, Hugh McPherson has a minor bird that works with him on the program.
Oh, yes, I know his name, and I know of his work, too. A good minor bird, yeah.
Well, supposing you tell us something about the West Virginia Monster.
Are you ready with the tape?
Well, it's going right now.
Uh-huh. Well, Hugh, I'd like to try and put it in a nutshell as follows, as I said before. First of all, I went down there about 5 or 6 days after the occurrence took place at the request of the North American Newspaper Alliance, for whom I do some reporting work and special representation, and also on behalf of True Magazine. It was Ken Purdy of True Magazine who, when running out of his office one day on some private business, picked at random out of a mass of clippings that used to come to his desk every day, a perfectly ridiculous statement that a 12-foot green monster with red glowing eyes had been seen on a mountaintop at Flatwood in, I think it's Saxton County, isn't it? West Virginia. I didn't know I was going to be asked to tell you about this tonight, so if my names are wrong, forgive me. And he gave this report, Ken Purdy, to John Newberry of True Magazine, who was their aviation editor and was interested in flying saucers and such, and said, get a hold of Ivan Sanderson and have him get down there and see what this is all about. Ken Purdy had an absolute genius of picking a news story. So I was rung up and asked to go down. So my assistant, Eddie Schonenberger, and I, we jumped in an old taxi cab we had at the time, and we took off. I may say that on the way down, we went through the worst rainstorm that I have witnessed anywhere in the world, and I've lived in Assam, and I've lived right on Cape de Buncha in West Africa, which are the 2 points of highest rainfall in the world, but I have never seen rain like we had on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Well, we rolled into Flatwoods the next morning.
That's Flatwoods, West Virginia?
Yeah.
Ivan?
Saxton County, I think, Saxton County, West Virginia. It's in the mountains. It is north of Charleston, West Virginia.
How do the roads there compare with those in Europe?
What, in the hills?
Mm.
Oh, excellent. They have very good motor roads going through. Of course, there are an enormous number of little what you call it, roads, dirt roads going up into the hills, because there's been extensive mining throughout that entire area. If you fly over it, you will see mine heads and mine shafts everywhere, and the tops of these wooded hills are completely covered with these dirt roads. Well, to make a long story short, this is what we found out during our investigations. There were 14 all told, a number of young people, kids and up to the age of 14, were playing football on a small field in the bottom of a little valley in the village of Flatwood. The village of Flatwood is at one end of this little valley. It's ringed around by mountains, as you down there will probably know better than I do, or our other listeners up here. Now, through this valley runs a road, a blacktop road, going from north to south, also a railway line, a railway track. And at the opposite end of this little valley to the village is a small railroad station. And there is a dirt road that crosses the rail tracks, leading off the blacktop, just by that rail station, then curves up round the back of one of these mountains and sort of peters out at a field. And up that road, stuck on the side of this hill, I would say, a very stony hill, are a number of dwellings. Up on the top, at the back of the mountain, there are 4 or 5 rather larger houses. One of those houses is occupied by a family by the name of May. The lady, Mrs. May, if I remember right, is principally concerned in this affair. These kids were playing just before sundown down on this field at the bottom of the village. And one of the kids looked up, and one of the little ones, I differentiate between kids and young people. Say kids, the 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and the young people above that, you see. But one of the kids looked up and he said, in so many words, "What on earth is that?" And they all looked around, and round the edge of a hill, behind the village, the north of the village, but lower than the peak of that hill or the one opposite it, came a pear-shaped, glowing red object which was pulsing from cherry red to bright orange, according to all the witnesses. It was traveling blunt end first. It traveled quite slowly across the valley over their heads and just managed to top the mountain on the other side, or the hill on the other side of the valley, which is that hill behind which there are these dwellings of which I spoke a moment ago. Well, the kids all said, as I say, "Gee, what was that?" And one of the elder boys, whose name was Nunn, a very, very intelligent boy of 14 years old, had remembered that at school they had been asked if they saw a meteor or anything like that and saw anything fall from the sky, that the geological surveyor would be interested in getting the remains of it or anything that was found on the ground. And he said, "Come on, that may be a bolide or something, and something looks as if it's landed behind that hill," because I must point out, yes, I'm sorry, that the kids all state categorically that this object, this large glowing object, which appeared to be about the size of a house, seemed to pause when it topped the hill, and then to sink, instead of going on down in the sort of trajectory, it stopped and sank slowly down behind the hill. And they could see this light pulsing behind the crest of the hill. And Nunn said, the 14-year-old said, "Come on, let's run up there. Something may have landed, and we may be able to get something for the geological survey," which I think is pretty bright and intelligent. So the kids ran up the blacktop, taking a few minutes, turned left on the dirt road, crossed the railway track, went up around behind the hill, and as they ran between the houses, several of the people would come out on the verandas, and they said, "What's going on?" And one of the younger kids said, "A flying saucer has landed," picking up, I mean, one of the little ones, you see. Mrs. May and a young man aged 18, who had just joined the National Guard, I think, or the services or something, was visiting with her. Some other people came out, and they grabbed a big flashlight, because it was just getting dark, and they saw this huge thing lying in a field about 2 fields away, up by the crest. So they all gathered together. There were, in the end, I'm sorry, I was wrong in saying there were 14 kids playing. The total party in the end was 14. So there must have been, there was May, Mrs. May and the young man, and then there were 11 kids, and then there was a little one, a little 5-year-old, also named Nunn, if I remember right, who was at one of the houses, and he tagged along behind. And to me, he is one of the most important witnesses in the whole case because of his extraordinary honesty. When we asked him certain things, he said, "But mister, I couldn't see, I'm too low down. There was grass in between me." I mean, these kids are the most straightforward, honest witnesses I've ever known. However,